Thank you very much. Sayyadati, Sadati, Marhaba. Ladies and gentlemen, hello. إذا كانت أستراليا تمتلك ثقافة فلماذا نعتقد أن لدينا لغة واحدة فقط? That's not my first language. You might have picked that up. In English, which is my first language, I'm here to ask, why is it that Australia holds so many cultures? We're proud to call ourselves multicultural, but we don't celebrate the multilingualism that also coexists with all of those cultures. That's a silence that I want to talk through. I'd like to question how it is that we can call ourselves multicultural, yet increasingly, I didn't know that was happening. Let me just grab thank you. How is it that we can call ourselves multicultural without also celebrating in the same breath all of the languages that come with that? And what's the cost? What's the cost to us of failing to do that? On my way to talking about this question, if books are dead, why on earth did we open a bookshop? I need to linger over the questions of language and Australia's account of multiculturalism, because for me, there's a grand silence at the heart of that. Strangely, we don't celebrate the incredible linguistic diversity that migrants and refugees have brought with them. But even before that, there's another silence, a deeper silence, where we fail to recognise the polyglot traditions, the ability to speak many languages and dialects of the First Nations peoples, the people who were here at the beginning. And though that's a legacy of multiplicity and plurality that has a life that's longer than the existence of the English language. So I think about the Seven Sisters songline, for instance, a songline that connects the west of Australia across the continent, the vast continent of Australia to the east. It's a huge story, a jigsaw that is held in different parts by First Nations communities, by traditional owners, and told in different languages. Many languages, many stories that together make a whole, make sense of this vast continent that we now call Australia. And there's something about having forgotten, or perhaps never really reckoning with, that value. And today I want to ask, what does it cost us? I think that there's a complacency. There's a complacency that means that as a nation we overlook one of the assets that could set us apart internationally. It's an asset that is cultural, social, intellectual, all of the arts and ideas that we foreclose to ourselves by insisting increasingly that English is our language. And it costs people. It has a personal and an intimate cost. What would it take for Australia to reckon with that value, to celebrate it, and to take the benefit of the hundreds of languages that are spoken here? More than 200 languages are spoken in our communities, and 50 First Nations languages are still surviving from, almost 200 that were spoken before our European invasion. Imagine that. Imagine if we were able to capitalise on that asset. It would be something that drives our economy and creates different types of communities and connections. For me, I can't help but feel that there's a kind of analogy to welcoming a stranger into your own home and inviting them in for tea, but not giving them the cup with which to drink, and ignoring the gift that they give you as they walk through your front door. What are we doing? So there are silences, there's inattentiveness, there's complacency, and there are contradictions. I think that we're at an important moment in time to think about these questions. In the last week, less than a week ago, we had senior political leaders saying, in the context of Indigenous education, that Indigenous learners should begin by learning to read, to write, and to think in the so-called national language. We have a situation in Australia where to become a citizen. Is anyone here not a citizen? Okay, so if you want to apply to become a citizen, you have to sit a test that's administered in English. How is it that Australia has come to the point where we say that to be Australian, you must already speak English? It denies the human potential to learn, and it denies the values of what people bring with them, or what they already held before we recognise them as first Australians. For me, these are really, really big questions with which to grapple. And they're not easy questions. Who here only speaks English? I speak other languages, but I was just encouraging you. So there's a huge challenge in this for you, for the 71% or so of Australians who only speak English. Because it means that we have work to do. It means that if we take this opportunity of speaking other languages seriously as a nation, that all of us have to step up and begin to be able to be more multivalent, more multilingual, and more capable of communicating with people unlike ourselves. So why do I care? I mean, I come from the heart of Anglo-Australia. I'm, raised in its traditions. I enjoy its privileges. I sit comfortably in its centre. And I also would like some water, if that's available. Why on earth do I care? Well, I think that I had a fantasy relationship with other languages and this idea of belonging elsewhere growing up. I made up languages. I insisted on learning languages. I learnt European languages, very Eurocentric. I got to high school and was made to learn Japanese. I cheated in my kanji test. I just couldn't seem to do it. But then fast forward to year 12, 1992, and I was sent to the Central Plains of Thailand in the first year after I left school, and I lost my mind. I had no language. There was no one that spoke English. I need to drink. I used to break all the cultural norms by eating copious amounts of chocolate sundaes and crying in public and blowing my nose. I felt a huge range of emotions, and I assure you they were more complex than I'm hungry, I'm tired, I need the toilet, I miss home, I'm sorry, thank you, it's delicious. I really did have a more complex inner world going on. So that experience for me taught me what it is to step outside of the centre and to be at the periphery, to be at the edges, to be without power, to be without independence, to have lost this tool that I rely on for my innermost self, for my power in the world, my command of English, my command of language and words. It meant that I had to understand that much of what I had held to be true and unquestioned, the things that I did not question were actually hugely dependent on where I had been born, that this was an accident of geography, and that things that I did not necessarily hold as familiar were not necessarily untrue, were not necessarily without value. So you see, this gave me an appreciation of the power of knowing in another way, the power of reasoning and expressing yourself in a different way, That was the beginning of it for me. Then fast forward, I think I'm about 29. I'm living in New York City, living in a Spanish-speaking neighbourhood and discovering the dimensions of class and power relations that that language informs and is informed by. Who wins, who loses, Spanish-speaking versus English-speaking communities. There was rapid gentrification. My presence in that community was part of that. So I felt personally implicit in a really complex politics. And I realised language has power. Language has political consequences. And then I think about my aunt, who is Burmese Chinese and named Go Lin, but I've never known her as Go Lin. I know her as Shirley. Why is that? She moved from Burma in World War II to the British India and adopted Shirley because Shirley Temple was big at the time. So, and that's how she's now 80. Shirley. Just last week, she came to an event at Lost in Books, the multilingual kids bookshop that I'm here to talk about. And I saw her in conversation with a young Chinese woman, and they shared a dialect from the south of China. And I noticed that this young woman, who's a student at this university actually, was wearing a name tag that had a Chinese name on it, but she'd introduced herself to me with an Anglo name. And we say empire's dead. You know, people are still leaving their names, the things that their parents gift to them at the door, to belong, to socialise, to fit in, to win a job. I've seen it. You know, colleagues of mine changing their name from an Arabic name to an English name. Why do we demand that of people? I could go on. In Fairfield, we see every day, we see just the complexity of the human condition. You know, people who are busting a gut to be productive, to be busy, to give of themselves, to share the skills that they've invested years of their lives to attain. Emergency physicians, civil engineers, film directors, doctors, lawyers, who Australia has no use for apparently, because we certainly don't invest in their transition into being productive, contributing members in the terms of their own training and expertise. Instead, those people are driving buses, driving taxis, taking our kids to school, cleaning our houses. What a waste, what a cost to the nation. I want to just go back to this idea of the national language. Let's just pause and think about that for a moment. In fact, there is no national language in Australia. There's no law, there's no edict, there's no official executive order that English should be the lingua franca of our nation. It's a cultural convention. It's something that occurs because of the weight of the majority. But as we all know, here in Western Sydney, mainstream English is not the language of the street. It's not what you hear unquestionably walking the streets. Certainly in Fairfield it isn't. You hear Assyrian and Arabic. The numbers tell the story. 2 out of every 5 people in this area are speaking a language other than English behind closed doors. And there's a question there about how comfortable people feel about speaking that language in public space. In Fairfield, it's even higher. It's 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5 people are speaking a language other than English at home. Now, this is a national trend. If we extrapolate that over the nation, the last census teaches us that we have really fast-growing language groups, Mandarin and Punjabi. It also tells us that a diminishing proportion of Australian society speaks only English. So that is a trend. It means Australia is diversifying and becoming more and more multilingual. I think about the people that this story plays through. I already mentioned the emergency physicians, the long list of really middle-class people who are not living a middle-class life when they come to Australia. We can complicate that in terms of people who have different roles in their home country, but really the story is the same of thwarted ambition and not being able to live a life on your own terms. It's an important question to grapple with because it dictates who belongs. It dictates who's employable, who's considered intelligent, who is allowed to live a full life with the full set of their whole selves present. Remember me in Thailand? This much of me on show. I want to ask the nation, what is the cost of ignoring this? I want to argue it's a huge cost. And although addressing it is an expensive exercise and a challenging exercise, it challenges huge systems, education systems, systems of communication, the way in which we assess and value who to employ. I think that it's worth it, and I think that it's something that inevitably we're going to have to become better at negotiating because the population story is already unleashed. We are a multilingual nation, and we need to learn how to act as though that is true rather than just accepting the multicultural part of that equation. I think about what else there is to gain. I talk about the personal cost, but think about it at a family level. So we have stories again and again and again of people who, I'm 43, people arriving in their 40s, the same age as me, in their prime. They still have working lives ahead of them. We hear stories from refugee families, at the moment predominantly from the Middle East, who are arriving and take stock of their situation and say, you know what, it's over for us. Our lives are over. Now, our job is to look after our children. It's all about creating a better life for our children. That's not an unfamiliar story, but it's a heartbreaking reality. It's not a cost that we should exact from people who come here, apparently to seek safety. It's too high a cost, and it's unnecessary. So then what can we do about it? How can we as a nation celebrate the fact that we have so many languages here? Unlike, coal, iron ore or gold, these things that we spend millions of dollars learning how to extract from the ground, we have riches scattered all around us in this room. But we're not very good at extracting the value. We just keep insisting that people's lives should be on pause until they speak English. But that's an impossible threshold for many people. When you look at the government systems, the government support that is wrapped around newly arrived adults, people receive between 510 and 800 hours of free English tuition. Now, I dare any of you to go to a country where you don't speak the language, to take 510 hours of tuition and to get on with your professional life or with shopping. I assure you it's nowhere near enough. So what's to be done? Firstly, I need to rehydrate. Well, at Lost in Books, we're trying very hard to answer that question. We began a social enterprise in Fairfield just over a year ago. We called it Lost in Books because that's what we hope happens when people walk through our doors. And I'll show you some pictures. This is an image from our first birthday last week, I think, 10 days ago. We're a place that is deliberately, intentionally polyglot. That means we're a place where no one language holds court. Yes, we speak English, but we also speak Arabic, Assyrian, Vietnamese. I could go on. There are 60 languages in our workforce. We have a great volunteer workforce. And that just touches the edges, I guess, of the diversity of the communities around us. We exist to champion multilingual literacy, to create a place that's rich with multilingual literature, books from around the world. We develop people's skills, we develop their social connectedness, their connectedness to one another and to services, we build confidence, and most of all, we validate the fact that people speak another language, and we welcome people who are monolingual English speakers to come and learn and satiate their curiosity or to begin the journey of learning another language. We identified a gap in the market of bilingual storybooks because through bilingual storybooks we're able to scaffold the acquisition of English as well as maintaining literacy in first languages. So this is something that happens in Australia in particular. Second and third generation children of newcomers often find that they are stuck between two language worlds. They're neither fully literate or deeply literate in the sense of being able to express everything that they feel in either language world. And often the ability to read or write in the second language or the first language, mother tongue, falls away. Because we're in such a rush to give people English that we forget that the strongest foundation for acquiring English is literacy and ability in mother tongue. That's what Lost in Books stands for. We take an appreciative approach. So, and this is really the lesson or the suggestion that we want to offer the community. What would it take? What would it take for us to value and celebrate this amazing richness all around us? And for us, it's an appreciative modality. It's saying, you speak another language, that's a talent. How can we put that to work together? You have skills. You came here with some training. Maybe that's useful. How can we put that to work together? What barriers might stand in your way, and how can we be a stepping stone to you becoming more independent, productive, and a contributing member to the broader Australian society? The overall question for us is, what if it became a national priority, an Australian national priority, to value everybody's first language, whether you are Indigenous to this country or you come from far away? What is there to gain from preserving, maintaining and building literacy in those languages? And at Lost in Books, we believe that that exchange is something that is rich and that stands to benefit all of Australia. So I want to honour the Barramadigal clan of the Darug Nation on whose lands we are, and to say Yanu Didjurigora. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you.